الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He blesses us wherever we may be. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He assists us in our affairs, that He accepts our goodness and He overlooks our shortcomings and our mistakes. Amma ba'd, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the reoccurring favour. For a number of years now, we've been going through the works of Shaykh Muhammad bin Uthaymeen, book after book. And today, inshallah, we begin another book of his. In actual fact, it's not a book, it's a transcript of a lecture. And you've probably seen it displayed الزواج ومجموع الأسئلة في أحكام. So now, the Shaykh in this book is going to talk about marriage and the rulings connected to marriage, and a number of questions that the Shaykh is asked concerning the topic of marriage. But before we continue, I'd just like to point out something which is really important. As we've just mentioned just now, that this is not a book which was written by the Shaykh. In actual fact, Shaykh Muhammad bin Uthaymeen, he didn't write a lot of books. A lot of the ilm that we have from the Shaykh, his opinions, his books, his works, etc., a lot of it is from his lectures. Now in that there is a reflection. For some people, they benefit and they transmit knowledge through what is written. But in our generation perhaps, the Shaykh gave importance to teaching in the Masjid. He could have easily put himself away and wrote books, etc. But he spent his life and a lot of his works in Aqidah, in Fiqh, in Tafsir, in this topic here as well, explaining it and talking to the people. And in that, like I've said, as a reflection, ilm is in the Masjid. The barakah, as you can see here from the Shaykh himself, you can find coming from ilm that is taught in the Masjid. This lecture here, the Shaykh delivered it, I'm just looking for the date here, 1398. So that's like nearly 50 years ago. 50 years ago he gave this lecture. Did the Shaykh ever thought in his mind that 50 years later, in a foreign language, in a foreign land, people are going to be going through just a lecture that he gave? So the point that we're making here, there's a lot of distractions that we have when it comes to seeking ilm. People have different ideas about how to seek ilm. But what we learn from the Shaykh and the legacy that he has left behind is that ilm is in the Masjid. Now, this is part of a lecture that he delivered. So in the Arabic, it's only roughly around 130 pages. I believe it's been translated. I'm not sure how many pages it is in English. But he's got an introduction to the topic. And inshallah today we're going to talk about the introduction, because the introduction is very interesting in what he says. Again, 50 years ago, he talked about society in Saudi Arabia at that time. And we're going to see what he's going to say. So that's one part. The second part is the actual topic itself, is the lecture itself, where he talks about the ahkam. What is nikah? How is nikah established, as in the pillars of nikah? What to look for when a person wants to get married? Some of the ahkam concerning marriage itself, as in within the marriage. And I think he's got a little bit talking about talaq, and if marriages end, what is the process of that. So that's, I would say, is the second part of the book. And then, obviously, that's got the fiqh and that's got the ahkam. But then the third part of the book, I would say, is very interesting also, because this is open question and answers. And when I was going through the questions, you see now in there the hikmah of the Shaykh. Now, the reason why I say that that is really important, there are books, even in English, on the topic of marriage by Shaykh al-Albani, by our Shaykh Salih Sidlan, and I'm pretty sure there'll be others, but that's what comes to mind right now. Most of these books, if not all of these books, talk about the fiqh of nikah, as in how to approach nikah, what you should be doing in nikah, the halal and the haram of it. In the question and answer session from the Shaykh, you find valuable pieces of advice on how Islam and how the Muslim should be within the marriage itself, how to make the marriage function. Now this is very important. The reason why, there's a lot of people who see the halal and the haram of it, but they don't apply it with hikmah. So a man might say, when I come home, my responsibility is to be the breadwinner, so I'm bringing money into the house, and the woman, she has to deal with everything. She might be struggling. And technically he might be right. It's not wajib, perhaps. I'm just using this as an example. Might not be wajib for him to help out in the house. The woman, the home, that's her domain. For the man, he's the breadwinner. So he could come home and say, listen, this is all your stuff, nothing to do with me. So he sits on the couch, on his phone, not engaging with the family. The fiqh of it, he might be right in that. So she can't argue and he can't argue. But is there hikmah in it? Is that a functioning family or not? This is where we find the benefits from the Shaykh rahimahullah. But today, like I said, we're going to concentrate on the introduction, because in the introduction he talks about how society is and the way society is heading. And it's very interesting that he talks about that before he delivers a lecture on marriage, as if they are connected, because obviously they are. And obviously the topic is important because this concerns everyone. It concerns us, it concerns everyone, whether you're married or not. It concerns the future generation. And as the ulama have mentioned, and even some of the ulama have mentioned in the book of Aqidah, that zawaj and nikah is a symbol of Islam. So the Shaykh begins by extending his thanks and his gratitude for being welcomed to deliver this lecture. And then the Shaykh says, I would like to point out a couple of things before we begin. Obviously I'm paraphrasing for the sake of summarizing. The Shaykh says, now here he is talking about the country where he was living in at that time. And people might have their opinions of Saudi Arabia today. But the point is, what he is saying is that it applies to the Ummah as a whole. Whether he uses the word Saudi Arabia or not, it applies to the Muslim Ummah. He says, the Shaykh, that the enemies of this religion are targeting the country, meaning he's talking about Saudi Arabia, but like I'm saying here, are targeting Islam. إنه يجب التركيز على المملكة العربية السعودية. He's talking about the country there. لكونها مهد الإسلام, because it is the foundation or the center point of Islam, and that the Muslims are connected to it. So what he is saying there at that time, 50 years ago, what they're trying to do is change perceptions, social perceptions, as to roles, as to marriage, the approach towards marriage, what a man should be like, what a woman should be like. He said 50 years ago. He's saying the enemies of Islam are attacking the view of what a man should be and what a woman should be in our country. The reason why, because they know is that if they can attack Saudi Arabia, which is the center of Islam, where the da'wah spreads from, where the Messenger of Allah ﷺ came from, where our qibla is, the Shaykh is saying here, they know that they can attack Islam and bring confusion to this religion. فَسَوْفَ تَحْصُلُ الْفِتْنَةُ وَالشَّرُّ وَبَلَاء. With the intent, and if they are successful in what they do, they will spread fitna, they will spell evil, and they will spell corruption. And then the Shaykh وَسَوْفَ يُجَوِّسُونَ خِلَالِ الدِّيَارِ. After it is established in Saudi Arabia, then it will spread everywhere. And the Shaykh spoke the truth. Because now it's not about one country or another country. The attack on what a man should be, what a Muslim should be, and what a Muslim should be, when it comes to our Aqeedah, when it comes to our Sharia, it is evident. And what is sad now is that you find a person, he appears to be upon his religion, she appears to be on her religion, but even they have been affected by what the Shaykh is saying here, which started more than 50 years ago. So what's the solution? He says, rahimahullah, Tawheed al-Da'wah, Tawheed al-Juhd, meaning being unified in the Da'wah, being unified and a single body when it comes to methodology. We must work together, and we must make sure that the enemy in their attacks on the Aqeedah of the Muslim must be repelled. وَلَكِنِّي, look what he says next. أَقُولُ بِالْحَقِيقَةِ, I say that the reality, I say with full directness. إِنَّنِي لَمْ نَعْمَلْ عَلَى ذَلِكَ لَمْ نَعْمَلْ عَلَى ذَلِكَ I do not think that this is going to happen. كُلٌّ مِنَّا كَأَنَّمَا يَعْمَلْ وَحْدَهُ This is because, as a Muslim ummah, every single person is acting for themselves. SubhanAllah, 50 years ago. لا نجد اثنين إلا ما شاء الله. You don't find two people who are believers على هدف واحد, who are upon one methodology with one goal. أو بعبارة أصح على طريق واحد. Or another way of saying it, which is probably more correct way of saying it, is that they're on the correct methodology, both of them. But then the Shaykh says, if we were to rectify this situation, we will find that the Ummah will have its honor again. And it will have its glory again. But this can only start off on an individual basis. A man knowing what is an actual man when it comes to Islam, and a woman knowing what is an actual Muslim when it comes to Islam. So then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, that it is wajib upon the ulama in this country, because obviously he's talking in that context, but it's wajib upon the ulama. And then later on he actually even says, the imma of the masajid. We can even extend it and say, tulab al-ilm. Upon them, it is very important that they teach people what the religion actually says. Teaching them the usul and teaching them the furu'. Meaning teaching them aqidah and teaching them the establishment of the sharia. But the Shaykh is saying here, وَنَحْنُ نَجِدْ This 50 years ago. Imagine what he would say if he was alive today. With all of the distractions, social media, dunya, fitna. وَنَحْنُ نَجِدْ أَنَّ كَثِيرٌ مِنْ طُلَّابِ الْعِلْمِ مشغولون بغير ما هم مكلفون به. You find most of the students of knowledge, you find most of the a'imma of the masajid busying themselves with those things which really don't have that much benefit. Not much benefit to the community. Either because they are seeking the life of this dunya or whatever, the Shaykh gives other examples. But because of that, there is a weakness in our communities. Now, if there's a weakness in this community and then a weakness in another community, then as a whole, collectively, as the ummah, يُضَعِفْ قُلُوبُهَا أَمَامِ الْأَمَّةِ أَيْضًا. The Shaykh is saying here, we then become weak. That person who is in charge, who should be using his position to explain to the people what Islam actually says, they then become weak, then we are all weak collectively. And then, and the Shaykh is saying here, now this is another stark reality, is that we find 50 years ago, we find that between the people of ilm and the normal people, that there is a gulf. There is not much of a connection. And now here, he is not talking about social media. He's not saying we should, level with the youth and we should do youth projects and youth activities. That's not what he's saying. He is saying here, he even gives the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ad-din al-nasiha. It is upon the people who are in charge of the masajid to teach people their religion and advise them in affairs which concern them, irrespective of age, irrespective of gender, irrespective of what of the nature of the problem is. It is upon the people in charge to take that responsibility. فَالْوَاجِبْ عَلَيْنَا. So the Shaykh is saying here, this is something which is obligatory, you don't really have a choice in. That we advise one another, we advise those people in authority, and the people in authority advise the normal people, the lay people, the common folk. That way, the Shaykh is saying here, this is how we can be unified. This is how we can establish the manhaj which is correct. And this is how we can gain that glory and repel the harm that is coming our way. But the Shaykh, he goes on and he's complaining even more, rahimahullah. He says, you find most of the masajid, ma'alasaf, ghalib, a'immatuha juhal. Most of the people who are in charge of the masajid, la yarshudun, wa la yunafsahu, wa la yatakallamun. They don't advise, they don't tackle issues, they don't use the position of the masjid to advise people and educate people, to be there for people. And because of that, the Shaykh is saying here, you find most of the common folk, the main body of the Muslims, being distracted from ilm and being distracted from what their religion teaches them. And in exchange, you will find that the masajid are not being used for the purpose of what they should be there for, and they are now engaging with the dunya instead. And the Shaykh is saying here, this comes from وَهَذَا كُلُّهُ بِتَقْصِيرٍ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ. All of this is because of the fault, those people who should be using their responsibility in the right way. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, about the youth. The youth have become isolated. وَشَيْءٌ آخر مهم جدا. He's saying this is really important. وَهُوَ الْعُزْلَةِ. That the youth have become isolated. They have become isolated. Now this is not only just talking about now as a demographic, as in a whole generation. Even within the youth themselves, people are isolated within themselves. And this is increasing as well. So now the Shaykh is actually using this as an introduction, because now here we're talking about marriage. And marriage, like we have said, is something which affects us all and will affect the future generations and will affect Islam going forward. And it, like we have said, is one of the symbols of Islam. If these problems aren't tackled, then that marriage will not be established in the correct way, and the barakah of the marriage will be lost. Because the enemy is fighting the Muslim and they're fighting the Muslimah, and they're, I don't know, maybe getting involved in marriage or talks of marriage, and they are, starting off a relationship and a life with one another, whilst these problems are still going on. So the Shaykh, rahimahullah, is pointing out something really important here, is that the youth have become isolated, not just because that there is a gulf, like we have said, between the people of knowledge and the youth, but also in and of themselves. And these are the people predominantly who are getting married. So if that's the case, then this is dangerous. So the Shaykh, rahimahullah, goes back to saying that the only solution is that if we go back to our religion, going back to the Kitab and the Sunnah, learning our religion for what it actually says, establishing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, being upon the correct methodology. And then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, that if we were to do this and establish this, then we will see the correct establishment of the religion, and then people will have their hearts open up and comfort established, and only then they can move forward and establish marriage in the correct manner. Inshallah, what we'll do is we'll go through the first few bits. So that's the introduction. We'll go through the first few bits of what he mentions when it comes to marriage. And like I said, the first part of the lecture, or the first part of the book, is talking about the ahkam. So he says, rahimahullah, an-nikah, in the linguistic term, an-nikah refers to a contract of agreement to marry. Abu Ali al-Qali, he's one of the ulama in the third generation, fourth generation from the linguists. He says that a nikah is when two people agree to get married and there are relations that take place within the marriage. So that's the linguistic term, meaning with that now linguistically is that there is a contract and there is an agreement for the man to be with the woman and the woman to be with the man, linguistically. وَمَعْنَى النِّكَاحِ فِي الشَّرْعِ. Now here, this is the technical terminology, and the Shaykh points out something which is really important here as well, which is not just connected to the definition, not just connected to the ahkam, but also there is an advice in here, if you see what he says. He says that the definition of a nikah, تَعَاقُدٌ بَيْنَ الرَّجُلِ وَإِمْرَأَةٍ, is an agreement, a contract between a man and a woman, يَقْصُدْ بِهِ اسْتِمْتَاعٍ, with the intention of them enjoying one another, كل منهما بالآخر, وتكوين أسرة صالحة ومجتمع سليم, with the intention of establishing a pious and a good family and creating a wholesome community. If we look at this one by one, we will see, even the Shaykh goes on and gives an explanation, but we will see a lot of khair and hikmah in this. Ta'akud bayna rajul wa imra'ah. Now, a lot of the ulama, when it comes to the books of fiqh, in fact you find this in all four of the madhahib, they liken the nikah contract to a business contract. Now this is very important for us to understand. The reason why is because one of the things that the Shaykh said in the introduction is that one of the attacks that we're seeing, there's so many, one of the attacks where they say, well, the woman doesn't have a say anymore. The woman should be able to get herself married. The woman should be able to do this. The woman should be able to do that. The man shouldn't assume such a role, etc. There's all these different things, right? If we can understand that in the Sharia, and this is something that you find even from the people of the book, is that the man who wants to get married approaches the wali. Who's the wali? The wali is looking after his daughter, predominantly. It could be something else. It could be brother, sister, whatever. But the wali is responsible over the one who he has guardianship over. Islamically, it is wajib for that wali to look after his daughter. Give her tarbiyah, give her maintenance, make sure that she is safe, etc. So what happens is a righteous man, a man that we expect good from and see goodness in, he knocks on the door and he says to the father, I want to marry your daughter. What's he saying? He's basically saying now, Islamically speaking, this obligation that you have over your daughter, I am willing to take your place in doing so. Do you agree? And then you have the nikah contract, the proposal and the acceptance. This is exactly what it is. The father then says, it is now your responsibility to look after her, to maintain her, to educate her, to protect her, to be her companion, to give her emotional love and care, to support her. And as the Shaykh goes on to say, to establish a family, to enjoy one another, to establish a community. Are you going to do that? Because I've been doing that. That's my daughter. You say yes. qabilt. You give the mahr to the girl. Now there's a contract between the man and the father. Man and the father. The man, the husband and the father. When we can understand it like this is very important. Why? Because this is now between the man and the father. If the woman is not happy with the situation, what happens now in society? She starts speaking against her husband, she goes out in society talking to her friends. I don't know, all the fitna, I mean, you guys probably know better than me. What should she do? Go back to the father and say, husband is not doing what you were doing, what you agreed with him. And that's how we can maintain, this is what the Shaykh is saying here, ta'akudun bayna rajul wa imra. It says rajul wa imra, but meaning the wali. يقصد به استمتاع كل منهما بآخر. If she's not happy, she takes it to the wali. The wali gets involved, and inshallah, if everybody has taqwa in this and the fear of Allah, then the situation will be resolved. But what happens if they're not happy? Again, you will see, even in the media, you've seen this recently on BBC, etc. The man is abusing talaq, the man is doing this and that. Yes, that's wrong. Nobody's justifying it. But what they end up doing, as the Shaykh said in the introduction, they will use this to attack Islam and every single one of us and try and use this to put holes in our aqeedah. Because this is an issue of aqeedah, this is an issue of sharia. So why is it that the man has got talaq? Why is it that the man can do this and do that and the woman has to just remain silent? Is that the case in Islam? No, that's not the case. But when you can understand that this is the contract between man, husband and father, then you can understand that this is between him and him. If he doesn't want to be married to her anymore, who's the talaq with? Him or her? He's the one who's got the contract. He's the one who said to the father, I will accept to look after your daughter. And if he's not happy with the daughter, if something's happened, I mean, sometimes even we have a negative outlook on talaq. I mean, it's not a good thing. Even the Sharia says it's makruh, but sometimes even, because it says at the time of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there could be pious people, but they just don't get on. Qadar Allah, these things happen. So now the man says to the father, I mean, in other terms, he says talaq. That's it. I don't want anything to do with this arrangement anymore. Go back to your wali. Why? Because the aqd is in his hand. بيد الذي أخذت النكاح. If she's not happy, is she stuck? No, she's not stuck. She asks for a khula'. What's a khula'? A khula' yani takhla'. She wants to remove herself from this. Meaning, husband, dad, got a relationship, got an understanding, got a contract. But she's not happy. She's stuck in the middle. She's not happy. This guy is not giving me my rights. He's not looking after me. There is no istimta'. There is no takween usra bis-salih and takween usra salihah. There's no mujtama salim. I'm not getting anything from this marriage. So what can she do? She can make a khula'. She goes to the husband and says, look, I know this is between you two, but I want to remove myself from this contract and agreement that you two have with each other. So this is just an example of how this definition is really important, because it helps us form the basis as to what the nikah and the aqd al-qiran is. Ta'akudun bayn al-rajul wa imra'ah. There is an agreement between the man and the wali that he is going to look after her. He's going to maintain her. He's going to protect her. يقصد به استمتاع. They're going to enjoy one another. That's not just one enjoy in one sense of the word. Enjoy meaning in companionship, in love and affection, in friendship. He's going to look after her. كل منهما بالآخر, the Shaykh is saying here. This is now working two ways. She has to be like that with him. The Shaykh is saying here that this is the definition in the Sharia of what a nikah is. If that is not found in the relationship, and then by definition, we're not saying that the nikah is not valid, but by definition they have not fulfilled what the nikah is. وَتَكْوِينُ أُسْرَةٍ صَالِحَةٍ. With this intention that they get married, not that they remain, single or celibate or without any children. The purpose of marriage in Islam now is for you to establish a family, so you can remain chaste, and then you can carry on lineage, and you can carry on Islam. وَمُجْتَمَعْ سَلِيمٌ. And then with that, if you've got one family, and he's got a family, and then you got a family, and then you got a family, and if people see that this guy's got a really good family, he's a really nice guy, his family are really good, the children are amazing, what's going to happen? You're going to want the same. Your non-Muslim friend will want the same. And this is precisely what happened when the Messenger of Allah ﷺ made hijrah to Medina. He sent one or two people, not a lot of people, Mus'ab ibn Umair and others. They went there, they started giving them da'wah, talking to them about Tawheed and reciting to them Qur'an. One group of people became Muslim. Everything changed. You know from your studies, and when it comes to seerah, at that time before the Messenger of Allah ﷺ came, it was civil war. It was like they were we're seeing civil war in so many different places right now. It wasn't safe to walk down the street. If you were from the wrong tribe, you could get stabbed or killed, or it could create some kind of altercation. But this group became Muslim. They said, we're not with this Aus and Khazraj business anymore. We are Muslim. So another group became Muslim. Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, one of the leaders of the opposing enemies, he became Muslim. One by one they became Muslim, to the point that the ulama in seerah and historians, they have said it was only a short space of time where you can see the Qur'an being recited everywhere in Medina. All you hear is the Qur'an is being recited. Why? Because now they've become Muslim, they need to learn how to pray. People need to learn the Fatiha and small surahs, so everybody is reciting the Qur'an. Can you imagine that? You're walking down the street, all you hear is Qur'an. Obviously the houses aren't like we have today. The point here, the Shaykh is saying here, وَمُجْتَمَعٌ سَلِيمٌ. When you've got nikah, when you've got iman in that nikah, and everybody is fulfilling their rights, it will then create a community which is established, which is pure. وَمِنْ هُنَا, the Shaykh is saying here, with this now, نأخذ أنه لا يقصد بعقد النكاح مجرد الاستمتاع. With this definition the Shaykh is saying here, we haven't just stopped by saying you get married for the purpose of fulfilling your desires. بل يقصد به مع ذلك معنى آخر. The definition of nikah, that's one aspect of it. But the Shaykh is saying here there are many other meanings. That you establish an usra which is salihah. meaning a family which is pious and established. How are you going to do that? You just make dua and expect it to happen? No, it requires him and her having taqwa. Him and her, like the Shaykh has said in the introduction, knowing what a Muslim is, knowing what a Muslimah is. وَمُجْتَمَعَاتْ سَلِيمَةً, the Shaykh is saying here, then having the establishment of that pure Islam, then we have fulfilled the definition as to what is the correct understanding as to what nikah is. لكن قد يغلب أحد القصدين الآخر لاعتبارات معينة بحسب أحوال الشخص. Shaykh is saying here, there is no doubt, and this is the reality, there is no doubt that a person will have more of an intention of one thing than the other. This is because you can't control your emotions, you can't control, the circumstance in front of you. So a person might want to get married only for the purpose of remaining chaste. And he hasn't got much focus right now on him establishing a family, etc., like the Shaykh is saying here. So the Shaykh is saying here, yeah, it is possible that the nikah is being established, technically speaking, but that's not the nikah in its complete sense. And I suppose why he is saying that is because, if a person was to say, well, I only got married for the purpose of me being chaste, is my nikah sahih? The Shaykh is saying here, yeah, it is sahih. But, like he has said, in its definition, an agreement between the man and the wali, so that he will look after the daughter, and she will look after him, and they will enjoy one another in companionship and love and compassion, and they will establish a family with one another, and then in turn, it will then establish a whole community of goodness. Before we finish today, what is the ruling on nikah? The Shaykh is saying here, this now differs according to a person's needs and their desires. As for a person who doesn't really have that much strong desire, then it is sunnah. And it is a sunnah which is established not just in our sharia, but of the way of the prophets that came from before. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Ra'd, ayah number 38, وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلًا مِّن قَبْلِكَ, we have sent messengers from before you, meaning there's never been a messenger before you. وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُمْ أَزْوَاجًا وَذُرِّيَّةً, and we have made for that messenger, that prophet, spouses and children. To the extent that even Isa ibn Maryam, when he comes back, one of the things that he's going to do, the Messenger of Allah has told us, Isa is going to come back, alayhi salam. He's going to defeat the Dajjal. He's going to be part of the army that sees Ya'juj and Ma'juj being removed. He's going to establish Hajj. These are all very important things, as you can imagine. But then he also told us, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that he will get married. If it wasn't important, then why would he mention that? Ibn Jawzi, rahimahullah, also said that Musa alayhi salam, as you find in Surah Al-Qasas, that he spent 10 years paying off his mahr. It's as if it was a mortgage. He spent 10 years, the agreement was 8, وَإِتْمَمْتَ الْعَشْرَ فَمِنْ إِنْدِكَ, if you finish 10, then that's from you, the father, the wali, the person he's got the agreement with. If you finish 10, that's up to you. So he finished 10 years. Ibn Jawzi rahimahullah said, 10 years of a life of a Nabi, of one of the Ulul Azm, you can't just expect that being wasted. Had it not been important, then why would he spend 10 years paying off his mahr? Therefore the Shaykh is saying here, وَهُوَ مِن سُنَّ الْمُرْسَلِينَ وَقَدْ تَزَوَّجَ النَّبِيِّ صلى الله عليه وسلم in Bukhari and Muslim, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Inni atazawwaj nisa, I get married to women. فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي, anyone who leaves off my sunnah, فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي, then he is not from me." What does he mean here by sunnah? You probably heard me say this before. He says here, because a lot of people will hear this hadith and say, yeah, okay, I know this hadith. It's sunnah to get married. But what does he mean by sunnah? Whoever leaves off my sunnah, فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. What does that mean? That is recommended. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah says that the word sunnah here doesn't refer to the way it's sunnah like miswak or wearing white clothes. How we would understand sunnah. It's not something which is optional that you do if you get rewarded for it. Here, فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي, he is saying that this is from my religion, this is from my methodology. And if a person was to say, I don't want to get married, not that I don't need to get married, I don't want to get married, there's a difference, yeah? فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. Then he's not from my way, he's not from my method. Why? Because the person's creating hardship for himself. So the Shaykh is saying here, now we have established that it is from the sunnah of the prophets and the messengers that came from before, and it's also from the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Shaykh then says, وَلِذَلِكَ قَالَ الْعُلَمَاء. For this reason, the ulama have said, إِنَّ الزَّوَاجِ مَعَ الشَّهْوَةِ. If a person gets married and he's got desires, male or female, and he gets married, to curb those desires, أَفْضَلْ مِن نَوَافِلِ الْعِبَادَةِ. It is better than him to get married than had he not got married and he's got those desires and he is plentiful in doing nawafil acts of worship. Now this is interesting because the Shaykh rahimahullah is going to give us a hadith in a moment that we're going to talk about, and a hadith I'm pretty sure you've all heard of, is that if a person is not able to get married, what's he supposed to do? Fast. Hadith of Ibn Mas'ud. But despite that, the Shaykh is saying here, if you are able to get married, you've got options, financially you're strong, your family are backing you, everything is ready, and you still don't get married, whilst you've got desires, then the Shaykh is saying here, even if he was to remain single in that state and do lots of good deeds, including fasting, because the Messenger of Allah ﷺ has recommended for single people to fast if they've got desires, it would still be better for him to get married. Now I don't want anyone to understand this in the wrong manner. I'm not saying just get married for the sake of it. It's very important. The Shaykh, inshallah, like we will see in the rest of the book, is very important that you take this decision seriously and it is well thought through. But the point here is that if a person was to become relaxed on it and procrastinate, then the ulama have said that if a person gets married whilst he has shahwa, whilst he has desires, afdal min nawafil ibad. It's better than him to get married in that state than him not be married and do lots of good deeds. The Shaykh is then saying here, this is because for this person there is a great deal of maslahah wal athar al-hamida, and it will bring about a good amount of goodness for him. And then the Shaykh rahimahullah goes on to say that for others it might be wajib. So now the asl is that it's sunnah. The asl of getting married in its origin, with the majority of the ulama also from the four madhabs, is that it is sunnah to get married, it's not wajib. But if a person has a strong desire, or they are feeling lonely, or there is some kind of, impediment in their lives that marriage can resolve, then it becomes wajib. وَيَخَافُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ مِنَ الْمُحَرَّمِ. He fears that he will fall into haram. Now again, haram, what is haram? A lot of people think haram from, the desire side of it, but it could be haram in other ways as well. إِن لَمْ يَتَزَوَّجْ فَهَا هُنَا يَجِبُ عَلَيْهِ أَن يَتَزَوَّجْ. If this person is alone and he's going to fall into the haram, then it is wajib upon him to get married. What's the dalil for that? Again, Bukhari Muslim and the hadith of Ibn Mas'ud, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, was speaking to a group of young men. He said, Ya ma'ashar shabab, O young men, man istata' minkum ba' falyatazawwaj. Anyone who's able to get married, then let him do so. Falyatazawwaj, meaning command, get married. This is well known with the ulama of usul, is that if there is a command in the kitab and the sunnah, then in its asl, it is wajib. فَإِنَّهُ أَغَدُّ لِلْبَصَرِ, because it will help you to lower your gaze, وَأَحْسَنُ لِلْفَرْجِ, and it will help you to protect your private parts. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ, and whoever is not able to get married, فَعَلَيْهِ الصَّوْمِ, then he should fast. فَإِنَّهُ لَهُ وِجَاء, and this will be a shield for him. Inshallah, we'll stop here, but we have covered, I think, some very important points, a very useful introduction, especially with all of these different isms that we are experiencing in the world today. The Shaykh has reminded us that the Muslim and the Muslimah have to be in touch with their religion and understand what it is to be a Muslim and a Muslim, understand the roles and understand those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made wajib upon us. And if there is a concept that you want to establish in your life, whether it's zawaj, marriage or otherwise, it has to be taken back to the Kitab and the Sunnah. And the Shaykh even uses the ayah, وَمَا كَانِ الْمُؤْمِنِ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ. It's not right for a believing man or a woman, إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ, if Allah and His Messenger have decreed and ordained something, أَمْرًا أَن يَكُونَ لَهُ خِيرًا, then he says, no, I want to have a choice in this. So that is a very important introduction. Then we've also talked about the definition as to what is nikah, and the Shaykh Rahimahullah has explained to us that this is an agreement between the man and the wali, that he is going to look after his wife, and he's going to maintain her and protect her, and he's going to be a companion to her. And then we also talked about the hukm of nikah, which is that it is mustahab, and it can be wajib depending on the situation. Yes.
What's the hukm if someone says, I don't want to get married?
So like the Shaykh said, if a person was to say that I don't want to get married, and I refuse to get married, then we have to look at this person's intent as to why they are saying it. If the person is saying, I don't want to get married because I don't feel like I have a need to get married, or I can't find someone that is suitable, or Wallahi Ladeem, I even came across a person yesterday, they want to get married. Allah reward this person. They want to get married, but they are not getting married to look after their elderly parents. And this person is getting old themselves. And that person also knows and admits that, you know what, I don't know, obviously Allah knows best how long the parents have left. But if they've got another 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, this person will be way beyond marriageable age. I mean, whatever Allah decrees. But what is likely and what is the reality is that person... So my point here, that's another scenario where the person is saying, I don't want to get married because my parents need me. If I was to get married, then who's going to look after them? So that's one viewpoint, which is that the person is not getting married, not because they don't believe it as being something which is good for them, or that it has been part of the religion. It's just the circumstance. The second scenario, if a person like the Messenger of Allah said, as we just mentioned, فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي, as Ibn Hajar and others from the ulama said, if a person says, I don't want to get married for the sake of getting closer to Allah, I don't want to get married because I want to remain celibate, and this is what the people of the book have done. I don't want to get married because I just don't believe in it. I don't want to get married because I've got bad thoughts of Muslims. I don't trust any of these people. Then all of that is wrong. I don't want to get married because I fear poverty. I don't want to get married because issues in tawakkul and issues in qadr, then that we will say that that person needs to be advised. It could be that person is upon haram. I don't want to say that it is haram because I can't generalize. Barakallahu feekum. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grants us tawfiq and success, and He makes us of those who are upright and fulfill their obligations in a manner that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us the best of companions in the dunya and the best of returns and companions in the akhirah. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله على نبينا محمد.